on several occasions, so I will abbreviate my staff report. The City of Pacific medical marijuana moratorium expires February 12, 2014. Marijuana use is still illegal on a federal level, and the City of Pacific will not issue business licenses for activities that are illegal on a city, state, or federal level. On January 16th, the State Attorney General issued an opinion regarding whether local governments are preempted from banning the location of a Washington State Liquor Control Board licensed producer, processor, or retailer within their jurisdictions, or for making it impractical for them to locate through land use regulations or business license requirements. The Attorney General's opinion states that cities, towns, and counties derive their police power, from Article 11, Section 11 of the Washington Constitution, not from statute. According to another attorney, proposed House Bill 2322 would prohibit any municipality from either preventing or impeding the establishment of a recreational marijuana business. And in other news, House Bill 2144, first read on January 13, 2014, is proposing that a share of the 25% marijuana excise taxes be passed along to local jurisdictions. All of these are currently in play. Recommended action is council adoption of an interim zoning ordinance regulating recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. Then, after 6 months, an ordinance banning medical marijuana processing, production, and dispensing due to health and safety issues, among possible alternatives. I don't know if council wants me to read the motion for consideration at this meeting or the title of the ordinance.
Council discussion?
Yeah. One thing I want to do is I want to listen to some comments at our second reading before I make a final decision on it. But I don't think we should get in the way of business from being able to do business in something that our citizens have decided is going to be a legal process. However, with that said, I also think that this is new, it's cutting edge, some of the technologies haven't been vetted because it's been illegal. We're taking an illegal process and making it legal, and I think we have a lot to look at and a lot of questions that need to be answered. And so I'm kind of know where I sit on this, but I know at the end of 6 months I don't think I'm going to be in favor of saying no, unless I got some reason, good reasons why not just based on staff proposals. So I do want to hear some public comment at our next meeting here coming up after this one, and then I've got some questions that I'm going to ask council and a suggestion on how we get answers for that.
I would like to add that the Planning Commission has on its work plan, which is yet to be approved by council, creating regulations for alternative regulation of both medical and recreational marijuana. So that is something that we have been working on, trying to figure out the direction that everything is going in on a state level, and also examining different portions of the city that might be appropriate locations should these businesses be allowed.
On that premise, with the Planning Commission and the city, we need to make sure that we utilize this 6 months. If this council decides to go with the interim prohibited zoning ordinance, they need to utilize those 6 months positively, because we have extended the previous moratoriums well beyond where we really should have. I understand the certain circumstances the city has had in the last couple of years, but with that in mind, taking advantage of our new association and with our risk management firm, that we move forward and let's get this stuff done. If nothing else, I think it's a priority, if nothing else, for the next 6 months, the planning commission, the city, to get ourselves in a line, because you're right, things that were established, that were written in the ordinance, as well as what Councilmember Cave has talked about, is the impact to the, what is the water, how we deal with the residuals, or the impacts to the environment, things like that. We don't know any of this stuff. The other issues, I think we just need to pass it on, but I just really have some concerns that we make sure we do this, to get it done. That's all I just want to get it done.
And so, what I got out of the last meeting, the first reading from the citizens is, you know, we had a year to have a plan or a moratorium in place. I don't believe it's fair. State, the way the referendum was written, only had 30 days to apply for a license, and they needed to have a lease and a business address in place to qualify, and they're still not guaranteed to get it. The ordinance could harm people who have invested large sums of money. That's something we have to be sensitive to. But then there's still the question: interstate commerce creates federal jurisdiction. It's against federal law. You know, what's the difference between pot crime versus alcohol crimes? One positive was legalizing it drastically decreases an illegal operation. So these are all things that we need to look at and consider. But then there's still, when you talk about going to business and in a litigious society, we have to have everything in place. We're following U.S. code, state laws, fire codes, building codes, who's going to inspect, and that type of stuff. And that's all stuff I think we need to consider.
I am concerned with one provision of the proposed ordinance, and I would like staff opinion on this. In discussing collective gardens, provision under section D, provision paragraph 6, under collective gardens, a business license must be obtained for the collective garden through the city. Current ordinance says we will not issue business licenses for any activity that is not legal under federal law, and as with recreational and medical, collective gardens are not legal under federal law. Is staff prepared to comply with this by issuing business licenses to collective gardens if we adopt this ordinance?
I believe the language, which was written by a lawyer who specializes in this material, probably should include must be obtained for the collective garden through the city, but will not be issued according to the balance of it. I fear sticking my neck out here because this is an attorney who was referred to us by our insurer, and I have to defer to this language. If you want my own personal opinion, I would be happy to give it at some point in time. But it is in line with creating regulations should
The problem is, it's not really a business. They're not making money. These collective gardens are for growing, if I'm not mistaken, they're growing for medical purposes. And under law, they're allowed up to 15 plants per person with per prescription for each person. And you can allow someone else to grow it for you, but I don't think you can have more than 3 prescriptions worth in one garden, if I'm not mistaken. The problem with it is by not having, if it's not licensed, we don't know where it's at. But I don't think we can, I don't want a business license on it, but what we do need is some sort of reporting mechanism, so the fire department knows it's there, the police department knows it's there, and the building department knows it's there. We know that these types of grow operations consume a large amount of electricity. They're done in residential houses on residential electrical meters, and they're not equipped for the draw, and that's what's causing a lot of fires. That's how we find them, through fire.
I didn't realize that.
If we have some way of them making them report that they have it, then we have a premise warning in place for emergency responders that show up, whether it's fire or police, and they can have a heightened level of awareness, and it's just something we have to address, but I don't think the way it's written in this ordinance should be, you know, I think Josh makes a valid point. I don't think it should be, those guards should be issued a business license.
Well, the bottom line of this ordinance basically is, as far as I can tell, is that it's not allowing any kind of production, distribution, or dispensing of either recreational or medical marijuana for that 6-month period, while the city is reviewing not only possible places for those businesses to exist, but also while the House is arguing a number of bills, one of which may force cities to allow the business without being overly prescriptive and making it impossible for someone to locate here. So it behooves us, and you make good points, Vic, about those are some issues that a lot of times aren't considered. That they refer to health and safety issues, and health and safety mean different things to different people. I think it's important for a city to know what kinds of businesses are operating in the event of any kind of catastrophe, whether it be with chemicals or there are a number of things that could go wrong. If you don't know that a business is there, then you've got problems. At this point, we don't require business licenses for nonprofits, and so that's going to mean that somebody with more legal experience than I find a way to draft language that says anyone who is conducting this needs to register.
Yeah, that's my concern with this as it stands now, is that it says, reading it, it sounds like we're allowing collective gardens with up to 10 members, and you can't deliver that to anyone other than one of the qualified patients participating in the collective garden. But it says the garden has to have a business license, and that's not something that we issue business licenses for at the moment. So I think
Is this something that needs to be amended?
I think we would need to amend our business license code to issue licenses for that, or we would need to amend this to strike that requirement.
I would.
Well, and I guess if you read further on, it says what we have right now is status quo. That the only thing we're going to be doing is working on having this figured out in 6 months.
Okay.
You know, these items that are in here, and it says what is existing stays status quo. And then the other thing that, and I think Paula was getting to as well, as far as collective gardening and the medical marijuana, that's also being done in the legislature, being fought out as far as whether those combine into retail as well. So that's another area that's still vague. Nobody knows how that's going to end up, and session doesn't end until the middle of next month. So we don't know where that's going to land either.
Another question, I mean, the city has to take into consideration is our licensing and ordinances that we will not issue a license to any operation that is illegal, state or federal. And this is a scenario where we have 1 foot in each camp. It's legal statewide, but illegal federal-wide. And we have to be very careful about how we change our language, because we don't want to change our language to allow us to license a federally illegal, and because not just for the marijuana, because once you open that door, everything is then subject. So that's the quagmire that we're being placed in here. So hopefully, between the state and our insurance companies, assistance, and the city and the public works, planning commission, we can figure this out.
I think, as Leanne indicated, there are a number of balls in play right now on the state level, and something we need to realize is if our land use regulations change with regard to these activities, that should be reflected in our business license code, and it may, on the advice of a lawyer, have to be an exemption or an exception, or there may need to be a section put in there for this particular activity. One added thing, the governance committee can also take a look at title, I think it's 9.66, which has to do with alcohol and firearms, which also needs to be updated to current code. And that should be examined while we're going through this whole process so that we can really get a firm footing on current events.
Further council discussion? Council pleasure?
We've been talking about it for a while. Josh, I added a thing about water. I'd like to have a discussion.
Okay, let's see, next is PSP Relocation.
This is the PSP Relocation for Stewart Road. This agreement we've been waiting for quite a while. We received it last week. It has been reviewed by myself, Jim Morgan, and our city attorney. The city's been working on the construction improvements for Stewart Road corridor. This is the agreement for PSP to move poles. And we are still working on it with Gordon. That this kind of goes hand in hand, but we can't move this forward without the final of the Gordon.
Question related to the money associated with this. Where is it coming from?
This is TIB money.
That's pretty large.
Could you please explain the acronym for those sitting in the audience?
Transportation Improvement Board.
TIB said that they were not going to release any monies until we had the Gordon paperwork and everything nailed down. Would they ease up on that now, so we have starting to disperse funds for us, or are we still on the cup?
No, they're still holding it, but we can't go forward with this until we have the Gordon agreement signed anyway. I mean, we can move it forward so we can get all the paperwork in order and all the final documents done.
So they're still holding our
they're still holding it, correct.
All right.
Further council discussion? Council pleasure? And then your water.
Yeah, the question I guess I had is that, watching the news and the weather for the last year or two, I know that last I heard was we're over 5 inches below normal water. No snow, we got snowpack issue. I don't know what the city's water levels are. And so that was one of the things I just thought I'd like to bring up, and if the city's monitoring that, how are we doing? Are we gonna look at water limitations, no washing cars, watering your lawns, what kind of issues, if any, that we might see coming up this summer?
And I can run this by Jim Chunky, but one of the ththings we're waiting on is the report for the snowpack, to see what that is. Typically, being as we have our own wells, they're not necessarily affected the same as like Tacoma or Seattle that have reservoirs. I can talk, like I said, I'll talk with Jim.
But they are affected by how much rain.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
The aquifer is pretty shallow here. Our wells are only 30 feet deep, so. But I'll get a report from him.
That's all I want. I
I'll
just
bring
wanted
that.
to take into consideration.
Unless
Think
they
about
drain
it.
like tap, our aquifers sit pretty good here.
Yeah.
What happens typically in this region, for our area, like Auburn gets most of this water from Coal Creek, is other jurisdictions need water, and so if we can conserve, then we can share.
Correct.
Who shares?
Josh, I can interject something on this. knowing this whole water system history. In the past, our wells have never been affected at all by any of the snowpacks or anything. Ours is spring water, and we've been very fortunate. If any deviation's been very, very little. And the only time that we ever had any restrictions on watering and everything else is when we had fewer wells. Since we put down these 2 additional wells, we've had no problem that way either. Now, our water forecast down the road is eventually, if we keep on increasing with the, got to figure on our commercial areas starting to grow and everything else, we will possibly down the road start to be into a water crisis again, but it will not because of any snowpack or anything. It's just because our wells capacities. Now, in talking about other areas that are going to be short of water, I really don't feel sorry. We sat here and we were struggling. We didn't know if we went every place. We went to Auburn. I got the whole file at my house, that 3 boxes full of where every place we went, every jurisdiction, and they said no to us, no to us, no to us. I found the water rights that the city didn't know we had, and we were able to put another well down, and that saved us. But none of these other communities were willing to help us. So I really don't care if they don't have the water.
Speaking of water, I know that Gordon has been, in the past, using a tremendous amount of water. Has anything been done for the city ordinance that requires vehicle water to recycle their water?
We're working with them for a couple reasons. It increases, of course, their sewer rate too, so we're working with them to try and get them to come up with some sort of recycle plan.
I know everything is rated in ERUs. We've paid, and ERUs were established long before people had low flow toilets and low flow shower head faucets and all that. How does our actual average consumption compare to our defined ERUs? Do we have a comparison on how much the average household actually consumes per heat?
We do, and I can get that back to you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
As I recall, it's 7.6 units is the average household water usage, which, and the base rate is set at 7.0, so most households are going to be getting charged 0.6.
What's the ERU stand for again?
The equivalent residential unit. It's a model for how much water, they model everything in terms of how many houses. Just wondering how much the average house actually changes consumption. Any further council discussion? Any further business for us tonight?